Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast. NFL division previews continue, and we move from the AFC North into what should be the hotly contested, very competitive NFC North for the 2024 season. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, I have to ask, being the president of the Stetson Bennett fan club, were you impressed with his resilience to throw 4 interceptions against the Dallas Cowboys, but lead a game-winning touchdown drive to get the Rams across the finish line during the preseason?
McVay knows his quarterbacks. He called Bennett a gamer. That's what we're going to go with.
I like the approach and the glass half full. It's good to see Stetson Bennett out there playing football. We know he took some time away to deal with some off-field issues last year. We'll see exactly where he stacks up. And while normally we kick things off talking about some of the rookie quarterbacks and what we saw initially from them, fortunately, Payne, it's the perfect introduction to delve right into 2 of the highest profile rookie quarterbacks, and we can break them down in the context of their respective teams. So we may as well get right into things and start with the Chicago Bears in the NFC North. The Bears priced as the 3rd favorite in the division behind the Lions and Packers, anywhere from 3-1, upwards of 3.5. Their win total sits pretty much 8.5 across the board, and a number that may surprise some folks, albeit not anyone in Chicago who are thinking Super Bowl or bust. The Bears are right around a pick'em to get into the postseason in Caleb Williams' rookie season. When we look at the Bears, we know about this much maligned franchise as it pertains to the lack of a franchise quarterback. They've never had a player throw for 30 touchdowns or 4,000 yards in a season. In comes Caleb Williams, the first FBS quarterback since your beloved Patrick Mahomes, with 30-plus passing touchdowns and 10-plus rushing touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. We can look at the Bears' schedule. It's a team that benefited immensely down the stretch, stacking wins, even flirting with the playoffs under Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent. But this schedule looks to be a little bit more daunting for the Bears, although if you look at the way things set up, they don't project to more than a field goal or slightly worse underdogs through the first 13 games of the season. But Payne, typically when we talk Chicago Bears, it's all about the defense and some of the big names on that side of the ball. But for the first time in eternity, there's optimism that they have the quarterback of the future with the number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams and what he can accomplish with new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron in year 1.
I think that's the place to start is Shane Waldron and the upgrade he is over Luke Getsy, and probably not a lot of Bears fans watching Seattle football the last 3 seasons, but the Seahawks offense is out there, finished above average in schedule-adjusted efficiency all 3 of Waldron's years, averaged out to be about 10th best over that stretch. He's from the McVay tree, so a very balanced offense in terms of pass rates over expectation, but I think compared to recent Bears offenses, I would expect more passing because of the scheme. And then you don't go and get Caleb Williams to throw at 5% below expectation like the Bears did last season. So that's kind of the general viewpoint of Waldron and what to expect here from the offense. Caleb specifically, we've said everything you can, right? That the arm talent is electric. It's on par with Josh Allen and Mahomes. The mobility and improvisation are certainly off the charts. And where I think we were correctly critical of Caleb last season was for too much backyard football. We identified it early. It became a talking point for the national media 3 to 4 weeks after we brought it up. And, you'd see Caleb bailing on the play too soon. But what's interesting is, tough place to be online right now. But what you do see online in the football area is Caleb Williams can't play within structure. That's what the naysayers are trying to pitch. And to me, that's just false. I think it's getting Caleb to do that more often. when he plays within structure and released the ball within 2.5 seconds at USC last season, his adjusted accuracy was 82%, only 2 turnover-worthy plays on 300 dropbacks. He's actually an efficiency monster playing within structure, and that's why we bang the table for more of that, despite some of the highlight reel plays he makes. And so ultimately, for me, the biggest hurdle year one is Caleb finding that right balance between structure and improvising. The weapons are obviously upgraded. I think we'll talk about those probably in a minute. To me, the bigger areas and where the most variance comes from is up front. I think if the Bears played today, left to right, you're looking at Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Shelton Coleman, Ryan Bates, and Darnell Wright. The Bears were kind of, if you're following this, they're kicking around the idea of bringing in help, and I think they're regretting not pulling the trigger on Connor Williams. Braxton Jones at left tackle has been solid for a 5th-round pick, just needs to find consistency. If you look at his game-to-game numbers, he was elite in big games against edge rushers like Rashawn Gary and Burns and Danielle Hunter. And then there's games where he struggles. Tevin Jenkins has embraced the move to guard, back-to-back strong seasons, finished 19th in pass block win rate among interior linemen last year. Darnell Wright played to a replacement level as a rookie, very consistent. Now, I think year 2 is about unlocking the upside a top 10 pick should have. Center and right guard is where things are messy right now. Colton Shellman looks to have won the anchor battle, had a fine season in 2022 as a pass protector, good season in 23 as a run blocker. If you can get both this year, right, the Bears' concerns decrease a little bit inside. Ryan Bates was actually supposed to battle for the center job, but he's playing right guard now that Nate Davis is dealing with a soft tissue injury. The organization doesn't seem overly happy with Nate Davis.
Oh, they're not. They're not at all.
Yeah. This injury feels more like a Nate Davis thing than what Bears trainers believe it to be, so we'll see how that plays out. And then obviously he was kind of their big offensive signing last year, and he performed well below expectation. 8% pressure rate allowed on pass rush snaps, didn't move anybody on the ground. So I'm interested to see how that relationship develops a little bit. But where the variance is here, if you look at surface counting stats, right, you'll see the Bears allowed 50 sacks last year, and then they had 20 holding penalties accepted against them, 29 holding penalties in total, and you're thinking my God, that's horrific. And then you dig into the metrics, and the Bears O-line finished top 5 in both pass block and run block win rate. So you could see the O-line improve if Caleb Williams is decisive with the football and plays within structure, something that Justin Fields wasn't. 3.4 seconds was Justin Fields' average time to throw. He held on to the ball forever, and it led to sacks. It leads to a much more difficult job for the offensive line. The weapons, and this is where everyone's hyped about the Bears, very much improved. And then you think about their ability to mesh very well together. I think over the years, our listeners know, we've both been higher individually on DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, and now they're in the same offense. And DJ Moore lives outside. He wins one-on-one against man coverage. That's just what he does. 2.3 yards per route run, was top 10 in total EPA among qualifying receivers. Keenan Allen is the ultimate zone buster. Runs routes to perfection, knows how to find open spaces. 2.4 yards per route run, also top 10 in total EPA among wide receivers. I think Keenan's ability to get open really helps Caleb play within structure more. Cole Kmet just made a massive year 4 leap, kind of catapulted into that top 10 tight end territory. 1 drop on 88 targets last year, 8th in yards per route run among tight ends, and was solid in pass protection. Rome Odunze is going to contribute. And I think barring injury to Moore or Keenan, Rome's probably going to find himself somewhere around a 50% of offensive snaps mark. So there's probably not enough balls to go around. And so what you're hearing now is suddenly the Bears are kicking the tires on Odunze returning punts to get him the ball a little bit more. We'll see how that unfolds. DeAndre Swift brings his best value as a pass catcher, elite out of the backfield, catching the rock. We saw that Saturday. Gerald Everett makes the move with Keenan Allen from San Diego to Chicago, solid number 2 tight end, so he'll allow Waldron to be more diverse with his formations if they want to use 12. But I think past the upgrades at coordinator, quarterback, and the weapons, you hit it. What's exciting is they get to build cohesion without a ton of obstruction. Right, the Bears are projected to face the very easiest schedule of defenses this season. Caleb Williams has the luxury of entering the league with a schedule of pass defenses that projects to be the easiest in the NFL. And for the potential concerns up front, a bottom 5 schedule of pass rushing defenses. And that's why we've seen this Bears win total get hit over 7.5 very early this offseason. We're kind of looking at like 8.9 right now, call it the consensus number. And that's where the conversation gets difficult, because as pro bettors, we're having this mental balance, this mental battle rather, kind of balancing the fact that Chicago's offense is going to be improved, right? That seems obvious. But you're hesitant because the current market is clearly factoring in that improvement. And at the same time, all of this outside hype from casuals is at an uncomfortable level. It typically leads to wanting a contrarian viewpoint. And so for me, like, these are always the toughest teams to gauge relative to market. On paper here, Todd, like, we can all see the improvement, right? Is that improvement being priced correctly is the question.
I mean, I think that's always the $100 million question. I mean, you've been banging the drum talking about how the markets are efficient. It's one thing saying a team is going to be improved, but if the market already knows that and forces you to pay a premium for it, then it's all relative. And when we talk about Caleb Williams, he's looking to break a little bit of Bears history at the quarterback position. Jay Cutler was the last Chicago Bears quarterback to start every game in a season. That happened back in 2009, Payne. When we talk about injuries and inconsistency at the position, the Bears have had 44 different starting quarterbacks since they won the Super Bowl back in 1985. It's the second most in the league. They've loved nothing more than to try and finally develop some of that stability at the most important position in the sport. Now, when we look at the other side of the ball, defensively, I mean, the defense improved after a dismal 2022 season in which they were last in the NFL in scoring defense for the first time in franchise history. They provided a little bit more resistance against the run, but when you talk about a run-stop win rate, nothing to write home about in that regard, and there was some inconsistency, especially in that defensive backfield. When you look at the personnel that the Bears have, whether it's up front, Payne and acquiring Montez Sweat to help with the pass rush, the amount of money that they spent last year in free agency and Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards to bolster that linebacking room, or paying the tandem, or I should say at least the first member in Jalen Johnson, hoping that him and Tyreek Stevenson can provide a dynamic duo on the back end. When you look at the Bears' defense, does this group have room to improve based on the opponents they'll face, or was some of what we saw late in the season last year more attributed to weaker quarterbacks and fortuitous bounces as it pertained to Mother Nature?
Yeah, I think you said everything that encapsulates the Bears' defense. It was perfectly said. I mean, the defense made material improvement last year, and that's what you should expect in year two with a defensive-minded head coach like Matt Eberflus, especially when the schedule of offenses is in the bottom third of the league, and then you upgrade the talent, as you mentioned. A lot of that improvement, though, came in the back half of last season when, some of the quarterbacks and offenses were a little bit questionable, but you can see it in the numbers, right? First 8 weeks, the Bears were 30th in EPA per play allowed. Week 9 onward, 4th. And you could actually see it trending positively in some of the underlying metrics, right? Early downs, which is a nice indicator. The Bears were 4th on early downs for the entire season last year. Red zone and third down defense, though, bottom 5. So you'd naturally think those two variance areas would lead to projecting another leap this season for the Bears defense, along with the fact that the offense will be improved and take some pressure off. I'm struggling to see real defensive improvement. And, the schedule of offenses the Bears face go from bottom third of the league to top 10. The strength of quarterback face year over year is one of the 6 largest increases. And you kind of hinted at this. That back half improvement defensively last year for Chicago, they faced Taylor Heineke, a combination of DTR and Flacco, a rookie in Bryce Young, Derek Carr in the Saints offense. And the other thing is personnel-wise that's why I'm struggling to see if there's massive improvement here. I think, you look at the top 5 defense the back half of last season. I just don't think you can play to that level because the talent to me just doesn't jump off the page. And you mentioned Montez Sweat, and having him for a full season certainly helps. Maybe I don't view him as a top-of-the-league pass rusher. The metrics say the same. He plays a premium position. It's a position that every defensive coordinator needs, and Sweat caught the right team at the right time in the right market. And so that's how that materializes. But I'm looking 12% pressure rate on pass rush snaps last season. It just doesn't correlate to 16 sacks again, especially with little help on the other side. He's a very good edge setter, 6% missed tackle rate. Sweat's a damn good player. I just don't think he's $98 million elite. The rest of the Bears' defensive line doesn't jump out either. DeMarcus Walker, right, that's my guy, Florida State guy. And I think we discussed him specifically last preview season where he was getting his first chance at being a full-time starter in year 7. Ends up playing 700 snaps, did so below replacement level. You look at the other guys on the edge, Dominic Robinson and Austin Booker. 2 young pieces. They look like dudes getting off the bus. There's certainly an ability to grow, but Dominic Robinson has been a liability his first 2 seasons. 4% pressure rate on pass rush snaps, 16% missed tackle rate. Can't set the edge. This is over about an 800 snap sample size now. Austin Booker is the 5th-round rookie. I'd actually buy some Booker stock based on what his ceiling metrics indicate. I just don't know how much he's going to contribute day one. And, if the young guys don't grow, then you're basically relying on Jacob Martin as your journeyman depth edge piece. I mean, this is going to be his 6th team in 7 seasons, nearly 2,000 snaps, and he's played for good defensive minds. Martin's a decent pressure guy, doesn't set the edge, can't tackle a lick. 31% career missed tackle rate. Inside, the leader is Andrew Billings plus defensive tackle. There has to be a year 2 leap for Jervon Dexter. He's the guy that can elevate the defensive line. He played below replacement level as a rookie, but the word is he's in good shape, and his get-off has improved by leaps and bounds. The first depth chart was released, and it scares me a little bit because if you look at the depth pieces inside, the Bears are listing Zach Pickens and Byron Cowart as defensive tackles 3 and 4. Byron Cowart hasn't shown he can play at this level. Was out of the league last year. 2022 played horrifically for the Colts. Prior 2 years in New England, he was below replacement level with Belichick. Pickens played 264 snaps as a rookie, struggled mightily holding up against the run, but I think, like Dexter, right, needs improvement there. If you follow the tea leaves, the Bears just signed Jalen Hutchings, an all Big 12 honorable mention guy, so they're desperately searching for tackle depth. And the reason I'm kind of thinking about it this way and maybe making it a larger focal point is if you look at the Bears, they face a top 10 schedule of rush offenses. One of the position groups that upgraded, you mentioned at the top, is they spent on linebacker last year. And I think everything we discussed heading in played out on the field. My stance was that TJ Edwards is a fantastic money ball purchase. He gets docked for not having elite athletic measurables, but he was around the ball last year, recorded a tackle on 20% of run snaps, finished top 5 in run stuffs, and did so with a single-digit missed tackle rate, and he was very good in coverage, held up well. Tremaine Edmonds is the athletic freak that was a wild overpay, and last year proved that again. He gave up nearly 9 yards per target in coverage. He brings little as a downhill blitzer, a pressure backer. The tackles accumulate, but the overarching stuff is he's not like this elite run defender either. 5 of 6 seasons now have been played below replacement level. The only season above came in a contract year. I actually like the secondary, and I think we've been on the Jalen Johnson train. There is not a world, though, where his 2023 season is repeatable. 33 passer rating allowed when targeted, only 50% of targets caught for 3.9 yards a target. It was one of the more elite coverage seasons, so expect a little regression there, even though he got paid and will still be a horse. Jaquan Brisker is a freak, improved year 2 as a tackler. His athleticism probably should be used more as a blitzer. Let's just see if there's that leap in year 3 from good to great. Kyler Gordon made a year 2 leap in the slot. His yards per target allowed improved by nearly 3.8 yards, and his missed tackle rate dipped 6%. So it was nice to see him make that step. Tyreek Stevenson, you mentioned, was thrown into the fire as a rookie. He survived. Let's see if he can make that leap. Eddie Jackson moved on to Baltimore after 7 seasons in Chicago. His replacement is a veteran in Kevin Byard. Byard was kind of the big lone splash defensive signing for the Bears. If Chicago gets the Titans version of Byard, this is an upgrade over Jackson, right? I mean, Byard was like the league's preeminent safety for 7 seasons. He just didn't fit in with the Eagles. I don't know what went on there in the secondary, but he was supposed to solve the problems. They only got worse after he arrived. If, and this is a big if Jalen Johnson doesn't regress too much, if Brisker and Gordon and Stevenson each make a tiny leap, and at their age with their pedigree, it's certainly possible, and if Byard returns to his Titans form, the Bears have a chance to field a top 7-8 type secondary. I was a little surprised. You read around the internet, PFF had the Bears secondary ranked 19th. I'd go under that ranking even with the schedule of passing offenses the Bears face increasing in difficulty. I just, to wrap this up, like, the offensive pieces have truly upgraded, and I think there's real hope at quarterback. And even last year, if you look at fourth quarter win probability, the Bears played like a 9.2 win team with Justin Fields running around aimlessly taking sacks. So I think Williams raises the floor with the mobility and the ceiling with his arm talent. I can't go over right now because it'd be bad practice. These are the types of teams you want to go over close to release and then figure out what to do with it later. And sometimes figuring out the rest later means you've set up a really nice middle for yourself right before the season starts. And so that's probably what's going to materialize for the people that did bet the Bears over 7.5 very, very early this offseason. Is they're going to have an opportunity to come back under 9 now. And that'll be an interesting position to be in. Certainly going to be improved. I just don't know. I don't think the market has undersold that improvement. And I think, we'll get to the other 3 teams here, but as a division, as a whole, I think all these teams probably improved.
And you mentioned the Bears within the confines of their division. I mean, they won't play a division opponent until they get to Week 11. So the Bears have a lot of opportunity to work out some of the kinks. They'll go through the AFC South, kick things off through the first 3 games, and they'll have some time for Caleb Williams to figure it out at the position before potentially digging themselves a hole or giving themselves an insurmountable lead in what should be an improved division top to bottom. From the Bears to the Detroit Lions, and Bears fans would love to see the Bears make that kind of leap that we saw from Detroit a season ago, coming up just short in the NFC Championship game where they squandered a massive lead at the half against the San Francisco 49ers. And when you look at the Lions, we talked about them on last week's show briefly during the best bet portion of the program. Their win total sits at 10.5, shaded to the over. They are massive favorites to make the playoffs, as you could understand, north of minus 220 at the majority of books. And when you look at the price to win the division, listed as the favorite in that plus 130, plus 140 range. It was a season of firsts in the Motor City last year, the first division title for the Lions since 1993. Snapped the second longest active drought in the league, an honor now bestowed on the Cleveland Browns. First playoff win for the franchise since 1991. Snapped the longest active postseason drought in the NFL. Won 2 playoff games in 2023 after having won just 1 in the previous 65 seasons combined, and tied the franchise record for wins with 12, a record match back in 1991, and they're now seeking back-to-back seasons with 10-plus wins for the first time in franchise history. And Payne, even before we get into some of the player personnel for the Detroit Lions and where they improved or maybe take a step back, their biggest coup was on the offensive side, where they retained their offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson, who spurned head coaching overtures from a variety of NFL franchises.
Spurned? Maybe. Requested a little too much? More likely. But I think people know our thoughts on Ben Johnson. I mean, other than encouraging family members, nobody identified Ben Johnson as an upper echelon offensive mind before us. So I think the case you're trying to make, I completely agree with, and it's that retaining Ben Johnson was probably the most impactful offseason move any team in the league made. He's not perfect. No offensive coordinator and play caller is, but I have faith that Johnson can fix the tiny area that needs improving by simply just cranking the aggression lever like he does in the early quarters and does in the fourth quarter. If you look, since Ben Johnson took control of the Lions offense in 2022, they're 3rd in points per drive. And the talent is starting to increase a little bit here. Like virtually every starting contributor returns. I think the other thing that's maybe a little bit narrative-based and, isn't specific to each unit, but I was thinking about this the other day, is Goff and his contract getting sorted. Like, at worst, Goff can kind of get in his own head, and he can lack confidence at times, and, you kind of see his eyes. He's like, oh, geez, here we go again kind of thing. I actually love the idea that Goff isn't going to be pressing when something goes wrong because he's secure now. And the other part of this that's maybe a little overarching is, the reason we bet the Lions over and even dabbled in some of the long shot markets like last team to lose is schedule. the first 10 weeks, the Lions have the easiest schedule in the NFL. And the schedule of defenses the Lions face is bottom 7 in the league. And then you look at the schedule of pass defenses. It goes from above average to bottom 10 year over year. And then we're also getting a slew of games where Goff is at his best. It's indoors. All dome games the first 8 weeks. Then you start to parse out some of those teams that you're trying to stack wins against early. The Rams are dealing with significant injuries right now. So suddenly in my mind, that playoff revenge angle might not be as big of a deal if the Rams can't get healthy. And then you have the bye week before Dallas. That's a team pro bettors have just sold and market all off season. And so on paper, those are the 2 toughest early season games for Detroit. And then you look in totality, 14 of 17 games Detroit plays are indoors. And Goff's indoor-outdoor splits intensified last season, if you can believe that. The surface level stuff, completion percentage dipped 7% outside. QB rating dropped 27%. Adjusted yards per pass attempt ticked down 30%. Interception rate increased. Touchdown rate fell off a cliff. So, the Lions and Goff really catch a break with the venues. Getting to the pieces, what surrounds him to me is pretty ridiculous. Arguably the best offensive line in football, which, again, is great for Goff because he has larger than league average deltas when pressured versus kept clean. You look at Payne and Taylor Decker, arguably the best tackle tandem in the league. Frank Ragnow at center is the anchor. 2% pressure rate allowed on pass blocking snaps the last 4 seasons. You also look at this. Graded out the second best run blocker last year. Graham Glasgow returned to Detroit after a 3-year stint in Denver, had his best season as a pro. Jonah Jackson walked in free agency, but if we're talking about just the 2024 season, Kevin Zeitler is an upgrade. If you look at his 12 seasons, he's never had a season worse than Jonah Jackson's 2023. And then you think about the backfield and Gibbs and Montgomery. They'd complement each other so well. Gibbs finished 8th in yards created, Montgomery 7th in EPA per rush attempt. They each bring a different skill set to the table. The weapons are high-end. Maybe it's depth that's a little bit concerning. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. That's an exciting duo there. And they just keep improving, right? St. Brown, 2.6 yards per route run last season. That was his career-high watermark. Ben Johnson, if you watch what he does with St. Brown, he becomes tough to really key on because he's just constantly getting moved around, lined up in the slot 55% of the time, outside 45% of the time. Then you look at Laporta. Kind of became Goff's security blanket, something he didn't have in prior seasons in Detroit. Laporta finished 2nd among tight ends in target share at 21%. He was also 6th in yards per out run among tight ends. The question here is, who's the third guy, right? We know Gibbs contributes through the air, but who's the third true pass catcher? Everyone is banking on Jameson Williams, right? He was picked 12 in 2022. He's had his first full offseason, right? If you think about this, year 1, he was recovering from the ACL tear from the national title game against Georgia. Last offseason, battled the hamstring injury and, was also dealing with the gambling suspension mentally. Ben Johnson's come out, and he said that Jameson Williams' route tree has grown. There's nothing he can't run now. So the Lions, I think, need that breakout year from Williams because he brings a different element that St. Brown and Laporta don't necessarily have. Khalif Raymond is the other option, but I think of him as more of a high floor guy, whereas Williamson is higher ceiling. And then you look at Raymond, also doesn't provide that wrinkle that Williamson potentially can. But Raymond's solid, over 2 yards per route run himself, sure-handed, 1 drop his last 105 targets. What I actually like about this offense, right, and again, maybe a little narrative-y, but Ben Johnson's 38 heading into his 3rd season as an NFL offensive coordinator, right? Sam Laporta is 23 heading into year 2. Gibbs is 22 heading into year 2. St. Brown is 24 heading into year 4. Penei Sewell, 23 heading into year 4. Jameson Williams, 23 entering year 3. The biggest difference makers for the Lions offense have the potential to reach a level we haven't seen because of age and growing experience, right? They're still kind of reaching their potential prime. These aren't 29-year-old guys where we have 8 years of data. They're not 33-year-old players where you hope to eke out one more good season. There's a chance Detroit gets 2 or 3 of these guys simultaneously reaching a new level and providing an upside that you just can't build into your projections. And Todd, you think about this staff, right? They truly believe and developing their homegrown talent. They're giving these guys 2, 3, 4 years. Now, the guys I listed off proved they're worth investing in, but there's still this element to where you get a couple of these guys finding a new level, and it just takes Detroit to a higher ceiling.
I mean, this is a team that tasted a bit of prosperity last year. We'll see if they can get over the hump and get into the biggest game on football's biggest stage, something that they appeared 30 minutes away from accomplishing, going on the road in the NFC Championship and coming up just short, given a remarkable set of situations and sequences that allowed the 49ers to get the better of them in that game. Now, if the Lions are going to be a legitimate Super Bowl threat, Payne, it's not just going to be because what this team can do on the offensive side, but they need to show market improvement defensively under defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. You look at the 2023 season by the numbers, they were number 27 in overall defensive efficiency, 27th in the red zone, 28th in points per minute of possession, 30th versus the pass, 31st in pass defense EPA. I mean, the pass rush rate was third in the league, but the sack rate was outside the top 20, so there should be positive regression coming in that particular side. John Kaminsky lost for the season injury along the defensive line, but when you look at the stop unit overall, there's no doubt they have a budding star and homegrown talent, Aiden Hutchinson, but elsewhere they went out, they addressed some of their concerns, brought in some different faces. Do you feel that this Lions defense can take a step forward, knowing how explosive the offense can be? No one's looking for them to be the 85 Bears, they just have to get to league average.
Yeah, I mean, you are bang on accurate there. I mean, you think about Aaron Glenn, he's got to be better, right? Because there's elements to this Lions defense that are actually good, despite some of those numbers you rattled off that were like all horrific. But the front finished 4th in yards per rush allowed before first contact, right? 5th in explosive run defense, 4th in pressure rate. And so in my mind, you're thinking, you know, with that kind of pressure, you'd expect positive regression because it doesn't equate to being 31st in sacks. But that's what the Lions were. And then when I tell you, hey, this was a defense that was, you know, top 5 in a predictive run metric, top 5 in a predictive pressure metric, there's no way this was an elite defense, right? But unfortunately, like that, the secondary was basically a sieve, right? And so that's why some of these numbers that you rattled off were horrific. But there were some underlying elements that really showed a good defense. And I think Aaron Glenn the responsibility is on him to figure this out. I mean, this is supposed to be the area of expertise, right? The secondary. And it's somehow the weak link. And that's why we laughed when he was getting like head coaching opportunities and interviewing for places. Like, you know, let's get him figured out defensively before we start handing him like the keys to an entire organization. I look at the talent, though, in the back last year. It was lacking. Then you had the injury bug that hit. And teams just attacked the Lions secondary, right? One, it's smart to pass. Two, that's where you want to attack the Lions. And then the other factor here is they were building all of these leads. The opposing offenses were forced to pass because they trailed at halftime. And so that's why the Lions couldn't really create a gap because opponents were attacking their weakness. And the Lions faced the 6th highest pass rate in the league. They gave up the highest percentage of yards in the league through the air. And, you know, there's, again, if you're kind of following this online discussion around Aaron Glenn, a lot has come up with his defensive style and whether he should dial back his blitz rates. We all have access to data now, right? And the numbers indicate Detroit was actually 9th in EPA per pass allowed when Aaron Glenn didn't send blitz, and the pressure rate still remained top 5. So you're thinking, hey, you know, easy solution here. If you parse out the data, when the schedule of offenses were weak the first 6 weeks and the Lions were healthier in the secondary, Glenn blitzed at the 22nd highest rate. Once the offensive schedule got tougher and the secondary couldn't hold up, Glenn just took this feast or famine approach, and it kind of worked later in the season. If you look at the 6 games prior to the NFC title game, the Lions, with that heavy blitz rate, they solved their sack problem because they were 3rd in sacks, and they were 1st in interceptions forced. So there's a lot of havoc being created. As I kind of map this out in my head, here's what I think happens. I think the Lions went out and you mentioned, right, that they spent serious resources on defense. They signed free agents. They facilitated some trades. They spent early draft capital. And it's all to improve the defensive chess pieces here. Aaron Glenn's going to play an aggressive style. He's told you as much again this offseason, and this was a direct quote I found. I like to smother the offense. I like to blitz, get after the offense. It's just part of what we do. It's our personality and part of the guys we have. So will the blitz rate dial back a little bit? Sure, but it's still going to be an aggressive defense. On talent, or on paper, the talent's improved here, right? So I I think a guy that we talked about maybe last week was DJ Reader, and he is recovering from a quad tear. He says he's going to be ready. He's dealt with a quad tear before on the other side, claims this one wasn't nearly as severe. He was, the Bengals' best run stopper by a mile, and so the Lions add him to an already good run defense. So that's a nice guy to pair inside with Aleem McNeil, who also took a massive step last season. Then you look at Marcus Davenport. I think he's extremely polarizing. He's never really been an every down edge, and then last year played 4 games for Minnesota dealing with injury. But if you look at his prior 5 years in New Orleans, he played between 300 and 500 snaps. And I think that was mainly the problem, right? He wasn't a full-time edge, and he needed to be for Saints fans to justify where he was selected. But he actually played at a really solid level, 13% pressure rate on pass rush snaps his final 4 seasons in New Orleans. He set the edge really well. And so to me, this is the type of short-term, one-year signing I like, where you're kind of playing that asymmetric risk game. It's a premium position, right? If Davenport plays to the 2021 form, the Lions hit the lotto here. And Aiden Hutchinson needed a running mate, and I liked what he did last year, right? It was unreal, and he played a lot of snaps, so you wonder if he can hold up playing that many snaps again. But Hutchinson had very little help on the other side, finished with over 100 pressures, 16% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. Aaron Glenn also likes the idea of using a Sam backer, getting that 5th guy on the line. Derek Barnes has primarily filled that role. Good run defender, struggles in coverage. Where you're hoping that there's improvement, right, is kind of in that Sam linebacker position, and then the linebacker room overall. Jack Campbell was kind of criticized for where he was drafted. There's a lot of guys who didn't think he could cover. The guys that love Jack Campbell said, hey, look at the 40 time, he'll be fine. He needs to make the year 2 leap. He was really good against the run, only an 8% missed tackle rate. He was actually picked on in coverage. He allowed 81% of targets to be caught and a 124 passer rating allowed. You have Alex Anzalone, solid player, does a little bit of everything, right? Good in run support. You can send him on a blitz, solid in coverage, does need to clean up the tackling. The Lions secondary obviously is the hot button topic here. I like some of the pieces back there. I think Brian Branch is a monster, played 700 snaps as a rookie, mostly in the slot. Very good in run support, solid in coverage, solid tackler. Another, you think about the offense and all the young kids. That's another guy on defense that can take that next step. Melifonwu made a year 3 leap, started the final 5 games of the season, was really good in coverage, was effective as a blitzer. Contract year. So you're expecting a little bit of a boost there. Then the Lions went out, they traded for Carlton Davis. I think that is very much a raise the floor type trade, buy low situation coming off his worst season. If you look at Davis, the prior 5 seasons in Tampa, he was above replacement level. Amick Robertson has had back-to-back replacement level seasons, hopefully a nice depth piece. And then you got the 2 upside kids in the draft. Terran Arnold is likely a day 1 starter. Enos Rickshaw Jr. has been a camp standout, which is no surprise when he's healthy, right? The guy's pretty sticky. He probably would have been drafted higher if not for the injuries. I think what you're looking for here is a defense that improves on early downs, finds some positive sack regression, which you mentioned, Todd, and then just has more depth and talent in the back that can compete and improve, on the bottom 5 pass defense. I think the Lions go as far as their offense goes, right? But improvement from the defense is what will get Detroit to that new tier of a team. And, I think about this, and it's like, did they deserve to beat the undermanned Chiefs in Arrowhead? Probably not. But you start to think, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. It's like, okay, they went into Arrowhead and beat them. They've had San Francisco on the ropes on the road. Maybe they're not as far away as some professional bettors think. There also isn't any massive detriments this year, right? Like the net rest edge is roughly league average. You get a bye in week 5, and you're saying to yourself, okay, it's early. But then in December, 2 different times, the Lions get a 10-day mini bye, followed by 8 days of rest. I mentioned the 14 indoor games, probably outweighing everything. And Goff is projected to face a very easy schedule of pass defenses. The Lions are favored in 14 games. They're only a dog of more than 1.5 points in a single game. And so I hate overs, but we're betting on at least 11 wins for the Lions.
I mean, look, this is a team that last year came into the season with all the buzz and hype, and I think they exceeded at people's expectations getting to that NFC Championship game, and the narrative has swung. I mean, this team now no longer can feel comfortable just winning a division or just making a deep run in the playoffs. I think you have to be down in New Orleans as the NFC representative for Lions fans to feel comfortable with the current direction that this organization is going. But to your point, you talk about locking up some of the key cornerstones of this franchise going forward, and for the first time in a long time, the Honolulu Blues have some staying power, not just in the division, but the pecking order for the NFC. I
got to be honest, I don't give a shit about the Super Bowl. Just get 11 wins.
Yeah, well, that's of course. Well, we do have Lions fans out there that are listening to this that want to hear you say Super Bowl or bust. I know we're not going to go that far, but I'm sure they're brimming with a little bit more confidence knowing that we believe they will get to 11 wins in the regular season, and we'll see exactly how far that can take them. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, for all things podcast related, not just in the NFL, but college football and NASCAR alike, you can follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And for those folks who had the foresight to sign up already for the Bet the Board podcast newsletter, the first edition of the fall landed in your inbox last Friday with a college football regular season win total that is already on the move. So the early bird gets the worm. No reason not to be signed up for that and not miss any of the great information we'll provide for our listeners from here through handing out the Lombardi Trophy down there in New Orleans in the middle of February. And Payne, a team right alongside the Lions that I think has aspirations of making a deep postseason run again in the 2024 season would be the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers, of course, shelled out the big bucks for who they believe will be their franchise quarterback in a long line lineage behind Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, now Jordan Love. You look at the Packers, their win total sits at 9.5, heavily shaded to the over. They are a favorite to make the postseason, not quite as robust as the Detroit Lions, and they're second favorites in the division, right around a price tag of 2-1. When we look at the Packers, what do they do in the draft? They try to address some of their primary needs. On the offensive side, gone is Aaron Jones, the Minnesota Vikings. In comes Josh Jacobs off a horrific season for the Las Vegas Raiders. But this is a franchise, as we all know, that is kind of the blue blood in the NFC North. Second most division titles as a franchise since realignment back in 2002. Average age on the roster at the time of the wild card game last year, 25 years and 114 days, making them the youngest team to win a playoff game since 1970. Over their last 10 games, if you include the playoffs, the Green Bay Packers went 7-3, which included a win over the 2-seeded Cowboys in the NFC wildcard game, and Green Bay became the first 7 seed to win a playoff game. This was a team, Payne, that was really a tale of two seasons. We saw them bottom out. We had a position on them to go over their win total, and you and I texted incessantly going, this thing has absolutely no chance. They finish with a flourish. They take the league by storm. And another team that was on the road in San Francisco in the postseason that wasn't able to close it out despite building a lead going into the half. When we look at Green Bay offensively, a lot of optimism, not just around Jordan Love, but a receiving core that's deep. It's young, but an offensive line that'll look a little bit different, parting ways with two often injured veterans. When we check the injury report, we're out more often than in. Green Bay Packers offensively, can this team continue to move forward with all of that youth?
I think that's the hope, and there doesn't seem to be a reason for that not to come to fruition. And I think what made the Packers season so enjoyable for us last year is, for years we were, I wouldn't say beating them up, but we just kept telling folks that Green Bay was overachieving relative to their metrics, and Packers fans hated us for saying it out loud. And we'd always say, hey, it's not personal, and finally we had a chance to prove it last season with that best bet over 7.5 wins flat. And now we kind of fast forward 12 months later, we're here talking about them again, and they're being priced at 9.7, so a more than 2-game adjustment. And there's certainly some excitement with how Jordan Love played down the stretch. You mentioned the early struggles. First 8 weeks were abysmal. 24th in early down success the first 3 quarters. Took a massive leap to 6th from week 9 onward, something we continuously talked about in season was that improvement. And, I thought Matt LaFleur made some very nice changes. They were substantial. It started with the script. There was some change in formation. There was change in personnel a little bit. Just a different philosophy, and that allowed Jordan Love to not live in so many second and third and long situations where everyone knew this erratic hope and heave was coming. Once the early down efficiency ticked up, we saw defenses on their heels, and LaFleur's playbook could open. And it's a pretty good playbook. He kind of knows how to string some plays together in terms of calling it. And you saw the explosive plays start popping because, all the predictability kind of diminished there. And from week 9 onward, Green Bay was second in EPA per play. Jordan Love was in a groove, and we knew the arm talent and the athleticism were there. But he kind of started to put it all together. Early downs, first 3 quarters from week 9 on, where Jordan Love was QB1 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. And I think just based upon what we saw in the preseason game, that LaFleur's going to have that same mindset to start this season, right? Continue those positive changes and, implement some counters to the adjustments, defenses will throw at him. Jordan Love seems to be growing still, right? He's had a great camp. He was perfect in his limited snaps this past Saturday against Cleveland, and he found Wicks on that variance down touchdown to start the game. You would fully expect better health for the Packers offense as well, right? They exceeded expectations despite that slow 2-5 start, and they had one of the most injured offenses in the NFL. If you just look at each position group, the O-line, the tight end group, the running back room, the receiving core, each finished their respective position groups bottom 10 in adjusted games lost. So some positive regression coming there. The schedule of passing defenses the Packers face is projected to be below average. Pressure burst pipes, we know that. We're also projecting Green Bay faces one of the 5 easiest schedules of pass rushing defenses, which I think is a real positive, because if you're following the camp reports, the glaring issue is seemingly the offensive line. They've been struggling. You wouldn't have known it this past Saturday against Cleveland, but Zach Tom is dealing with a pec injury. Did return to camp for light work. You have the first-round pick, Jordan Morgan, who's actually slotted to move from tackle inside to right guard. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, so let's monitor that. The rest of the projected starters are Rasheed Walker at left tackle. He was kind of an unsung hero last year, 7th-round rookie that played 850 snaps of damn good ball. Can that be repeatable? We'll see. Elton Jenkins, damn good left guard. Josh Myers has been the weak link at center for 2 seasons, below replacement level. But if Tom and Morgan miss any time, I think this line is a little bit problematic. We'll see. Deep group of receiving options. And I think the Packers organization, if you're following these tea leaves and getting some intel, right, they feel like they've gotten to the bottom of Christian Watson's never-ending hamstring issue. He visited Wisconsin School of Medicine and kind of uncovered the problem, and so the necessary steps have been taken this offseason or continuing to be taken. You feel good about the rest of that room, right? Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed were both over 2 yards per route run last season, and they offer different traits. Romeo Doubs doesn't separate overly well, but really great red zone option, top 15 in the league in target rate inside the red zone. Bo Melton had a solid rookie campaign, and you're expecting a big leap for tight end Luke Musgrave, who battled injuries as a rookie. I'm interested to see, and you kind of hinted at this, I'm just higher on Aaron Jones than everybody. I'm interested to see how life looks like without him. My feelings are well known there. We clearly like Aaron Jones more than LaFleur by a long mile.
More on Aaron Jones later in the program.
Yeah, he finished 9th in yards created and 7th in total EPA among qualifying running backs because of that value as a pass catcher. What version of Josh Jacobs is Green Bay getting? Right, 2022 Josh Jacobs graded out the best back in the league, over 3.4 yards per rush after first contact. 2023 Josh Jacobs, RB 46, 2.3 yards per rush after first contact. And then LaFleur can't seem to quit A.J. Dillon. Marshawn Lloyd was drafted in round 3, but there hasn't been an indication that he's pushing for that number 2 job, and he's battling a hamstring injury. So Todd, for me, it's like, which one of those backs provides receiving value and explosiveness, right? A.J. Dillon couldn't spell explosive, and Josh Jacobs finished running back 48 out of 49 qualifiers.
Explosiveness,
explosive
neither
play
of
rate
them.
last season.
Jacobs is the better pass catcher of the two.
Right. It's just like, who's replacing Aaron Jones? Like, which one of those guys is that threat in the pass game? Which one of those guys provides the home run threat?
The now
I
injured Marshawn Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm hearing the camp wasn't great. I thought he was the guy. I know we were higher on him at USC. We kind of outlined it in the Pac-12 preview last year that we're like, hey, Marshawn Lloyd's going to have a big year here. He just supposedly has not been pushing A.J. Dillon at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, you saw flashes of at SC that you could never get the consistency out of him, and you wondered if when that light bulb was going to go on. To your point, clearly hasn't been the case just yet, but you're exactly right. I mean, if Green Bay wants to show balance, I'm not sure either of these backs gives them that luxury, something that Aaron Jones did down the stretch when the offense really started to hum over their final 5 games into the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I am ready to move on if you are.
Yeah, we can jump to the defensive side of the ball where there's a change in leadership there as well. Joe Barry, who has been well chronicled on this very program about some of his shortcomings, is out. In steps former head coach and defensive coordinator of sorts, Jeff Hafley from Ohio State. This was a Green Bay defense that ranked 20th or worse in points per drive, scoring percentage, yards per play, and third down conversion percentage allowed all last season. But there are a lot of pieces to be somewhat excited about for the Packers if they're going to head in the right direction. Their big offseason acquisition was bringing in Xavier McKinney to shore up the back end. You didn't get a full season out of Jair Alexander. Arguably the most impactful thing that Jair did, much to the chagrin of his head coach, was not knowing the rules when it came to a coin toss that he decided he should be out there for against the Carolina Panthers. But Payne, when you look at this Green Bay team on the defensive side, we know they've spent a ton of draft capital on that side of the ball over the last couple of years. It was an endless source of frustration for Aaron Rodgers. Eventually, all of that potential has to go out there and achieve those lofty draft positions. Maybe Jeff Hafley can be the perfect chef to put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, letting Joe Barry walk was a positive, and then Jeff Hafley, I think, saw the writing on the wall at Boston College, so here we are. Hafley does have 7 years of NFL experience, and I think at Boston College we'd probably agree that his defenses exceeded the talent level. And then, I think change was needed for Green Bay. You just can't have that much talent and, as you mentioned, and field bottom 10 of the league units. And heading into this season right now, Green Bay has 7 first-round picks on defense, and then you got guys like Preston Smith and Xavier McKinney who are early day 2 picks and a couple other early day 2 picks. So the players are important, but I think, we'll have to mention here a scheme change is coming, right? Hafley is going to transition the Packers to a 4-3 defense. It's the first time Green Bay's base D will be that since 2008. Coverage is going to change some as well. Green Bay was a heavy zone team. Hafley said that he's still going to show zone looks, but came out and was like, hey, I like to press here. And he believes in press man philosophy. I think maybe you'll see more of that in games against, opponents that don't have a mobile quarterback. Maybe, dip into more zone stuff against teams that have mobile quarterbacks. We'll see how that unfolds. But I think the great thing is that if you follow a Hafley, he changes things up and he's adaptable. So that's a positive, I think, for Green Bay. The other tone that you get is just a general aggressiveness and attacking style for Hafley, where it felt like Green Bay was kind of just playing defensively on their heels the past couple of seasons. The talent, there's a ton of it up front, right? Rashawn Gary was fantastic again after recovering from an ACL tear, 16% pressure on pass rush snaps, set the edge really well. Preston Smith is a solid veteran who provides some pressure and can also set the edge. Van Ness was a great depth piece as a rookie, over 360 snaps of above replacement level ball. Let's see if Kingsley can overcome some injuries there. Tore his ACL in January, was battling a hamstring injury in camp, but another kid who played big snaps. Inside is Kenny Clark. He's interesting, right? Like, never got back to that 2017, 2018 form. He's going to be 29 as the season rolls around, but he's actually coming off one of his best pressure seasons, 13% pressure rate on pass rush snaps from the inside, 18th in pass rush win rate among defensive tackles, and had 7.5 sacks. You got a bunch of young kids that surround Clark. TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks. Wyatt was, I thought, electric in terms of pressure, 16% pressure rate last season. Brooks, I thought, handled the transition from the MAC to the NFL quite well. 400 snaps of above replacement level ball there as a rookie. TJ Slayton, if you watched him from game to game, he kind of hit a wall weeks 10 through 12. And that was kind of, you saw where the snaps increased all season. It kind of warmed down a little bit. The first 8 weeks were good. Caught a refresher, and then from week 14 on, damn good as well. So if you can get TJ Slayton to play to those early season and late season levels, you'll really have something here. Linebacker is the big question mark for me. It might not be for others. The Packers let Devondre Campbell walk. You have Quay Walker, obviously a first-round pick in 2022, right? When I watch him, it's very feast or famine. Like, the highs are elite. The lows are unplayable. So your hope is that Hafley can unlock some of that consistency from Quay. Third-round rookie Tyron Hopper has actually been running with the first team. Good speed, plays physical, but he's not overly strong, if that makes sense. Right? If a lineman can get to the second level and get his hands on Hopper, he typically gets washed. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of unfolds. You have Isaiah McDuffie. He's played less than 700 snaps in 3 seasons for Green Bay at linebacker, but he played at Boston College. Right, so he knows Hafley's scheme. Maybe that propels him into the starting role, at least early on in the season. And then you have second-round rookie Edgerrin Cooper. I think he's got the highest upside in the entire room, but he's dealing with a hip injury, so hopefully he can get back healthy. The secondary is an interesting mix for me because it has horses, and then there's some concerns, right? Jair Alexander absolutely loves the idea of more press man coverage. When healthy, he's one of the league's best cover corners. You kind of want to buy low on Jair individually after his worst season. You mentioned Xavier McKinney. Packers made him one of the highest paid safeties in the league. He deserved it after last season. He focused on football, had a great year, 5.3 yards per target allowed. He showed well in run support, 94 tackles, only a 5% missed tackle rate for McKinney. You went out, drafted the rookie Javon Bullard, seems to have locked up that safety spot beside McKinney. He's been the star of camp. He was elite for Kirby Smart last year. 35 passer rating allowed when closest man in coverage for Georgia. Where the concern lies is almost everywhere else, right? Corner number 2 in the slot. Eric Stokes heads into year 4, 1,500 career snaps of below replacement level ball. His last 600 snaps, Stokes has allowed over 80% of targets to be caught in a 130 passer rating. Now, if you believe what you hear, Stokes has been a surprise in OTAs in camp so far. Stokes claims he's feeling great, feels like his old self again. If you listen to some of these local beat reporters, they're saying it's time to buy back in on Stokes. We'll see, right? The slot is interesting because on paper, Cassine Nixon will fill that role, especially with what he's being paid. For me, Nixon's below average corner whose greatest value will be special teams, especially this season with the new kickoff rules. The other possibility at slot, and it wouldn't shock me if this is how it eventually looks, is having Bullard slide into that role. If rookie Evan Williams continues having a fantastic camp, Williams would then pair with McKinney at safety. But the one thing that causes me some concern for like massive improvement, and I feel for Hafley a bit here, he's walking into a situation with loads of talent, no doubt. But the Packers faced the 26th easiest schedule of offenses last season. It's projected to be a top 3 schedule this year. So in year 1, Hafley is dealing with the largest year-over-year increase of schedule of any defensive coordinator in the league.
I mean, it's an interesting team. Do you feel the market is pricing them correctly given the hot finish to last season, or do you feel this is a fair reflection of what people and analysts should expect from Green Bay? Having another year with Jordan Love, a true offseason for him as QB1 of sorts, and to build on some of that momentum with some of the potential defensive improvements you can see with a change of DC.
Yeah, and the reason I think I was quicker on this team than others is simply put, like I'm good with our win from last year. I'm not entering a market that's 2.2 wins higher than what we went over last year. Now, again, what makes this difficult, similar story with the Bears, right, is that you have a quarterback and all these young pieces on offense that you mentioned have the ability to find a new level we haven't quite seen yet. And so you'd be banking on that going over to exceed the market inflation, right? I'm not interested in doing that. Right? I have no interest in taking my money from last year over 7.5 and be like, let's do this again, right? Let's go over 9.7. I just have no interest in that. So that's where I'm at on maybe the Packers market pricing.
It's always an interesting team. We know a fervent fan base. You talked about how they had no love for us as a podcast, given what we had discussed in previous years. We kind of were banging the drum for them to take a step forward last year. They did not disappoint. We'll see how they handle the weight of expectations this coming season. Last but certainly not least, in the NFC North would be the Minnesota Vikings. And when we look at the Vikings preseason outlook, I mean, this is a team whose win total has hovered right around that 6.5 range. You're talking about a long shot to make the playoffs, at least the longest short on the board, and a double-digit dog to go and win the division in 2024. This is a Vikings team, of course, that believes they have their quarterback of the future in J.J. McCarthy, who they drafted in the first round, traded up to get Dallas Turner to help fortify things on the defensive side, but also bring in Sam Darnold on a one-year deal. You mentioned Aaron Jones to help solidify the backfield situation. And this is a Vikings team that started last year 1-4 in their first 5 games, rattled off 5 straight wins in their next 5 before going 1-6 in their final 7. 14 of the 17 games they played were decided by a single possession, and over the course of the season, it was Kevin O'Connell that had to try and dance between the raindrops, starting 4 different quarterbacks with very different skill sets. It was the most in a season that Minnesota had been forced to start. When we look at the Vikings, Payne, Wes Phillips most likely going to go with Sam Darnold and as their game 1 starter. It's just a matter of time before J.J. McCarthy takes over. I don't want to throw cold water on the performance that we saw against the Las Vegas Raiders, but McCarthy showed an ability to toss the deep ball, something that wasn't all that common in his arsenal while at Michigan, just given what he was asked to lead the Wolverines to that national championship. What do we make of Minnesota on the offensive side? Arguably one of the most underrated and underappreciated offensive minds in the entire sport at the head coaching position.
Speaking of dancing between the raindrops, that's currently what I am doing right now with everything coming in. A little distracted here. Listen, I think when you look at Minnesota's offense overall, you have to think about last year in that Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins missed 18 games combined. And then you had this combination of Nick Mullins and Joshua Dobbs, who had a 6% turnover-worthy play rate. And so what do you lean on? Potentially a bell cow, which the Vikings did not have. And so when your $45 million quarterback goes down and arguably the top receiver in the NFL misses significant time, you don't expect much out of the offense. And I think you hit it perfectly in that with those circumstances, Kevin O'Connell led and called an offense that somehow finished above average in early down success. And if you exclude those turnovers, Minnesota finished 11th in EPA per play on all downs. So I think it's fairly safe to say at this point that Kevin O'Connell knows what he's doing offensively, and you can kind of just look past the end results. The process tells you that he knows what he's doing. He was using the highest rates of play action on early downs with those backup quarterbacks. There was heavy rates of motion, all of the quarterback cheat codes we talk about, and O'Connell wasn't making excuses for what he had to work with, but he was kind of aiding those lesser quarterbacks. And every time you would watch a Vikings game and see a ridiculous turnover and be like, WTF, and you're like scratching your head, like Kevin O'Connell's running up there, and he just very encouraging to the makeshift quarterback room, which I would probably appreciate as a player. So you can see how he gets the most out of his offenses. This season, to me, feels completely different, right? Justin Jefferson is healthy and kind of taking his nutrition seriously now. I think we outlined our love for Aaron Jones and his ability to contribute in both the run and pass game and do it efficiently down to down. Last year, 62% success rate on all plays while offering a home run threat. Jordan Addison, with the focus on him for most of the season and horrific QB play for large stretches, I thought had a fantastic rookie year. He finished 7th in total route wins. He can get open, right? And he's versatile enough to line up inside or out. Let's see how many games he's suspended for after the July arrest. The word is at least 3. Maybe there is something coming down this week I'm potentially hearing on a specific amount of games being announced by the NFL. Unfortunately, right, TJ Hawkinson is going to miss some time. The reports there are wide-ranging, but I think it was Dan Graziano. I want to give him credit for it. He was hearing somewhere between 3 to 7 games missed for Hawk. Jalen Naylor and Brandon Powell are battling to be that next option. Naylor has had a fantastic camp, and so that battle between those two becomes magnified in terms of importance until Addison and Hawkinson return. Offensive line, that's the other thing that is improved under Kevin O'Connell's watch here, is that group right there, one of the league's better tackle situations with Darrisaw and O'Neal. I look at Brian O'Neal, finished third in pass block win rate. If you throw all of the offensive line positions in a bucket, right, tackles, centers, guards, Christian Darrisaw graded out 11th among 200 qualifying linemen. The interior is where the questions are. You have center Garrett Bradbury. I think he's viewed differently within the Vikings organization than what the data suggests. But he's a plus run blocker. He's improved enough as a pass protector, but basically a replacement level player through 5 seasons. Guard is the issue area, right? It's up for grabs. You got 3 guys battling it out. You have Ed Ingram, who was a second-round pick in 2022. He's been below replacement level his first 2,100 snaps in the league. Blake Brandel and Dalton Reisner are the other two in the mix at guard. Reisner actually finished 9th in pass block win rate among interior linemen, just doesn't get much push in the run game. But I think once Reisner finishes rehabbing his back, he's going to be the best of the 3 options. And then Brandel got extended. He just hasn't shown a plush trait for 3 seasons now. But that's kind of what surrounds the Vikings quarterbacks up front. Sam Darnold, you mentioned, I think he's being given the final chance to start in this league in terms of a potential full-time starter. We'll see if he runs with that. He's obviously comfortable with the situation here, right? I mean, his QB coach is Josh McCown. They've played together. They have a prior relationship. I talked earlier about what Kevin O'Connell did for Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs last season. Again, if you exclude those turnovers, Nick Mullins was 3rd in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation among quarterbacks with at least 100-plus attempts. And that was just because O'Connell had good game plans and the scripts were good and, played to the strengths of his quarterbacks and, provided all of those cheat codes I mentioned. And Sam Darnold is never going to live up to being the overall 3rd pick. But you start to look like his last 8 games where he attempted at least 14 passes, his QBR was 54 in those 8 games. 50 is league average. And then you think about 6 of those 8 games were being played in Carolina where Sam Darnold was dealing with a talent void, we'll call it offensively. And he had, Brad Idzik, who was a first-time offensive coordinator. So, I'm not completely on this Sam Darnold's horrific train. Some of the recent data even suggests, he's competent and now he's going to have someone that's actually putting him in the best positions possible. At some point, though, right, J.J. McCarthy's taking over. Is it week 3? Is it week 10? Is it heading into next season? Who knows? But it's inevitable, right? The arm talent and mobility are excellent, and it's why J.J. McCarthy was a 5-star recruit. What's obvious to me is, and I know we've talked about it over text a little bit here, is, McCarthy at this point is quite polarizing, right? The non-believers are going to show a clip of McCarthy holding the ball forever and patting it and throwing it late over the middle and getting picked off. And then the McCarthy truthers are going to mash up JJ completing passes on air and tell you he's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Tom Brady rolled into one. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle there. At Michigan, McCarthy did just enough. It was a run-first offense. If McCarthy wasn't throwing with a play fake element, his play dipped substantially as a passer, larger than the average delta. I wasn't high on the Michigan version of McCarthy as others. That's well known. Neither was Minnesota's organization, right? GM, head coach on down. They made massive offers to the Patriots to move up and take Drake May, right? And if May doesn't pan out and McCarthy is the second coming, Vikings fans will tell you otherwise, that never happened, right? But the reality is they preferred May. What I do like, though, is McCarthy's talent is off the charts, right? And then you start to really think about this. Michigan's weapons were extremely poor. If you look at the last 3 drafts, just the weapons, the best guys J.J. McCarthy played with were second-round tight end Luke Schoonmaker and third-round receiver Roman Wilson. And then I start to think about the offensive minds J.J. McCarthy played under at Michigan. Right? It was Josh Gaddis, who we know is incompetent at this point, and then Sharon Moore, right? And so that's why I'm open-minded to what J.J. McCarthy can be at the next level, because whoever the Vikings quarterback is this season and potentially for McCarthy moving forward, right, he's going to have elite weapons. He's going to have an elite tackle tandem. There's been an upgrade at quarterback. The offensive mind is going to put McCarthy or whichever quarterback there is in the best positions to succeed. And that quarterback, whoever it's going to be, is going to face a schedule of defenses projected to finish in the bottom 5 of the NFL this year. So I'm kind of buying this offense a little bit. It's just, we'd be bullish here, right? We'd be talking about a best bet over 6.5 wins if we were a little bit more sure on the Jordan Addison suspension and, if Hawkinson healed a little bit quicker.
Do you believe the overtures that the Vikings really wanted Drake May over J.J. McCarthy that was floated around the draft time?
I know what the offer was. It was massive, yeah.
Gotcha. No, that's fair. And we see Drake May continuing to work.
And that's the difference, right? Think about this. Like, if you're Drake May, you're saying to yourself, fuck me. Like,
100%.
The money's great, but I would have gotten to throw to Justin Jefferson with an offensive-minded head coach, with a ready-made situation, and now you're in New England with a defensive-minded head coach, probably one of the worst tackle situations in the league, and not a true number one. And this is why it's like, Drake May sucks, J.J. McCarthy's great. It's like you walk into an environment, and they are polar opposites.
Not even that. Drake May is trying to fend off challenges from
Stop it.
Summertime
Stop
superstar
it.
Joe Milton.
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
Well, look, we joke about it all the time because you and I share a similar sentiment on Joe Milton, but I think Albert Breer over the weekend had the perfect tweet about the Joe Milton experience. He says, people in New England don't watch college football, so they have no idea what Joe Milton is. He found himself in the perfect situation where he can run around, tap the ball, hold onto it for 7 seconds in the pocket against third stringers, and then throw bullets to guys that aren't catching the ball in stride and look like he's got an inside track to being a starting quarterback at the next level.
I got text messages, and they were like, why is this guy not starting, right? All of the fantasy guys who now delve in the player prop markets, right, who can't get enough of over rushing props, right? Like, what's going on here with this guy? So you got a shot to start. And so I just put my phone on silent the other night.
If Joe Milton does get a start in the NFL at any point this season, unless the opponent is a bottom feeder, I will do everything I can to bet the Patriots team total under and look to fade them at every opportunity I have widely available to me, including betting yes on Joe Milton to throw an interception.
Listen, the talent's off the charts. No one has ever debated that.
No,
and even
that's
we
never been
joked
up for
last year,
question.
we're like, hey, this guy's going to show up at the combine, and in basketball shorts, he's going to look like the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's going to be able to throw it from his knees 80 yards, and then you see he is working, right? He lost like 15 pounds. So you don't want to like crap on the guy, but I mean, there is a large enough sample size over like in a really good offense, right? The same one that Hendon Hooker was in that like almost won Heisman, and Hendon Hooker just did not have a very good preseason game there against the Giants. But like the talent is there. No one will ever dispute the talent. So like you don't want to completely rule it out, but boy, I mean, he's been given every chance, and just it has not looked good when the Bullets are actually live playing against number ones.
No, that is for sure. Now, before we close the book on the Minnesota Vikings, we do have the other side of the ball to address, and that, of course, is a stop unit led by defensive coordinator Brian Flores, a group that goes from being league average in overall expense to one of the cheapest stop units now in the league. The Vikings, well, they were the NFL's most blitz-happy team, ran 341 plays defensively with 5+ rushers last season, was the most in the league, blitzed the league high 51% of the time, but pressured opposing quarterbacks at just south of a 22% rate. This was a Vikings defense that finished 13th in scoring after being ranked 28th in 2022. So they made strides in that regard, but the pass rush is going to look a little bit different. Gone is Danielle Hunter. In steps Jonathan Grenard. They trade up to bring in Dallas Turner, hoping that they can get something out of him. Andrew Van Ginkel comes over from the Dolphins, a player that you know all too well, who ranked 10th among qualifying pass rushers and pressure rate last year. The back four, for me, leaves a little bit to be desired. But when you look at Minnesota defensively, what are some of your expectations headed into the season?
I got to find out if I have you on mute again.
I just learned to keep going when you have me on mute, and hope nobody blinks.
I was texting you a bunch because there's a lot of preseason stuff I'm attempting to get down on while I record a podcast. Which, if anyone saw this going on, you'd be like, "How is this happening? How is this possible?" But we are dancing between the raindrops here. Defense, Minnesota. I think Brian Flores is really good as a defensive mind, right? That's pretty set in concrete, right? He knows and can coach defense, and I thought Flores was pretty innovative last year, and you mentioned some of it, right? It took imagination for him because, yes, there was some expensive pieces, but there wasn't a lot of talent. And, he also dealt with an above-average rate of injuries to his defense. And you saw what Flores did, and he just was like pulling out all the stops, right? 4 safety looks, 3 defensive tackle looks, 3 edge rusher looks. You mentioned that blitz rate. I mean, it would have Wink Martindale reaching for the lotion. And you kind of just like put it all together. And the Vikings finished 11th in early down defense, 11th in schedule-adjusted efficiency. Now, the faces are a little different, right? Danielle Hunter, Jordan Hicks, DJ Wanham, Marcus Davenport, they're gone. The big splashes are at edge, right? Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. I think what's interesting is, metrically, those guys, we think about them a little bit differently than maybe Mark. I mean, Andrew Van Ginkel, certainly. Like, I just don't know how he's a 2-year, $20 million guy when everyone, there's other guys making $100 million. Like, both finished top 20 in pass rush win rate among edge defenders. Both set the edge well the past 2 seasons. You're hoping that the tackling gets cleaned up a little bit. We saw Minnesota move up to land Dallas Turner out of Alabama at pick 17. So I like that trio on the edge. And again, Flores has no issue in some packages using 3 edge defenders at once. So that'll be fun to see. Inside, I think, is maybe where there's potential concern, right? Minnesota needs better from Harrison Phillips. He's coming off his worst season in 6 years as a pro. If he can get back to that 21 and 22 form, I'll feel better about this interior. Jonathan Bullard was re-signed. 7 of his 8 seasons have been played below replacement level. Jerry Tillery is a first-round bust that Flores is trying to revitalize here. His first 4 seasons in the league were literally unplayable, like just an absolute liability. Did show some flashes with the Raiders last season, but he's been dealing with an injury in camp. Jonah Williams has flashed this offseason. He's been used in those 3 defensive tackle groupings with Phillips and Bullard. Again, playing those exotic 3 defensive tackle looks at times is certainly a reason why Minnesota was solid against the run last year, 6th in yards allowed per rush before first contact. Linebacker group, returns Ivan Pace, who I thought exceeded all expectations as an undrafted rookie. Played 700 snaps of damn good ball. A little bit undersized, but had single-digit missed tackle rate and was fantastic in coverage. Less than 5 yards surrendered per target for Pace. Blake Cashman, I don't know what they're getting there, right? He signed in free agency. I don't know what happened, but the light came on, right? If you're just looking at him in an Excel sheet, the first 4 seasons between the Jets and Texans, Cashman played 600 snaps of legitimately unplayable football, like doesn't belong in the league. Last season was one of the best linebackers in football. So D'Amico Ryans, touched all of the right buttons to get the best out of Blake. You'd have to project some regression there. The cornerback group is concerning for me. Mekhi Blackman metrically was the Vikings' best, cover man. He tore his ACL 2 weeks ago. Byron Murphy, feels like the annual tradition of bashing him. He just isn't that guy relative to the draft position in the contract. 102 passer rating allowed when targeted for his career, a matching 102 last season. He was a liability against the run as well, 24% missed tackle rate. Akilib Evans played over 800 snaps last season, allowed 70% of targets to be caught with a 105 passer rating allowed. It doesn't sound like Andrew Booth is carrying over the flashes from last season. Reports are that he's struggling in camp. He's been very poor. And then the unfortunate passing of your third-round rookie, Kyrie Jackson, that leaves a void, right? This is a guy who's 6'4", 78-inch wingspan, very fluid. I thought Jackson was better than where he got drafted. Just a sad situation there. Shaquille Griffin was brought in at $4.5 million to be, the man in the slot. He's just an average player. The safety duo of Cameron Bynum and Harrison Smith is solid, but Harrison Smith's approaching 36 years old. I think the elite days are behind him. So you're, again, one of those players, the inverse of what I was saying with the guys in Detroit. It's like, can you get one more year out of him? That's kind of what you're thinking with Harrison Smith. But there's 2 things going for the Vikings defense here, right? Is that Flores is probably going to get better results than the sum of the parts. Because you mentioned this year, right, not spending a ton on that side of the ball. the schedule of offenses the Vikings faced this season eases up. Last season, it was a top 5 schedule of passing offenses faced. It's projected to be bottom third of the league this season, so maybe that calms some of the concerns there at corner. I'll be honest, Todd. Like I'm not quite there yet, but the combination of Kevin O'Connell and Flores make it difficult to not see this team go over 6.5 wins. The division has really improved as a whole, but again, just that Hawkinson, Addison, suspension injury combo is kind of what's keeping me off this.
It's interesting for Minnesota too, because when you go through their schedule early on, they have a chance to pick up some wins, at least you would think, somewhat in theory, and then schedule gets a little bit tougher, but there's kind of ebbs and flows, and to your point, until you know exactly what kind of personnel is readily available for you, especially on the offensive side. If you're going to be down a weapon or two, I can't imagine they throw a rookie quarterback feet into the fire early on and let Sam Darnold kind of ride it out and make that decision as things progress. So an interesting team, especially one worth monitoring on a week-to-week basis to see how they're priced and see what that roster looks like in terms of their available 53 each and every Sunday. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, as always, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, this is where we get to the best bet portion of the program, and I know you've warned our listeners over and over after all these years about, hey, look, every time we do a show, there may or may not be a best bet or something that's actionable. We mentioned the Detroit Lions as a buy-on team when we covered the AFC North late last week, but wasn't sure if you had something in mind to try and get our folks to the window for this very show.
Yeah, I don't really love our portfolio of NFL futures in terms of what was available now versus some of the things we had previously taken last year. We loved them, right? I think we went 7-1 on our 8 NFL previews with our futures there. Now I will say I went back and kind of looked at my notes and what we discussed last week, and we'll just kind of flip-flop this, but I was thinking a little bit more, and again, man, I'm just a guy that does not like overs, but I think there's some value in a player prop here. Let's go Jaylen Warren over 590.5 rushing yards. You can find that at a couple places out west. All of the MGMs have it. And I was kind of thinking about what I had said in that preview, and you get this run-first system with Arthur Smith, right? The Falcons last year had the lowest rate, pass rate over expectation. So that's a positive. We know this is going to be a run-first Pittsburgh team. Lots of heavy formation use, and the Steelers have the personnel to pull that off with their tight ends and play bully ball. The lone part of the Steelers' schedule that gives them a little bit of a breather are the opposing run defenses, projected to be one of the 5 easiest. This also, with Arthur Smith, he doesn't have an attachment to Najee, right? There is no attachment there. He's new. This is his offense. He wasn't part of the regime that drafted him. Now, certainly Najee is going to get carries here. But you also start to think about Jaylen Warren's running style. And he's basically a quicker, faster, more athletic version of Tyler Algier, who was a guy that Arthur Smith loved last year, who was taking time away from Bijan Robinson. So I kind of see that similar role there.
I will not stand for Tyler Algier slander on this program, Payne.
The guys that I do respect in the fantasy community are higher on Jaylen Warren this year relative to ADP. So we're all kind of like in this mode of potentially buying Warren. So over 590.5 rushing yards, which again can be found at a couple places out west, specifically MGM and their 9,000 properties.
Player props, a market that continues to grow and increase in terms of widely available numbers that are out there. Do shop around. Prices, as always, may vary on those particular markets. All right, my friend, anything else you would like to share with our loyal listenership before we reconvene on Thursday? And north, we head to the south, the AFC in particular.
Jesus, this went really long.
I mean, this is arguably, can make the case that this division from top to bottom might be the more competitive than what you'll see in the AFC North this season, much to the chagrin of those 4 fan bases.
Yeah, again, not speaking in terms of like win totals and market pricing, but just team on paper, all 4 seem to be seem to be improved.
And look, rest assured, if this podcast went a little bit longer, we'll be able to make that time back in spades, much like a pilot in the air, this coming Thursday and following it up on Monday.
Next? AFC South.
AFC South.
Right into
the NFC South.
I may call for the bullpen here. AFC South, I don't mind. NFC South, boy, you and Billy could be cut out for that.
We're running the 2-minute drill on the Falcons, Bucks, Saints, and Panthers.
Jesus
where
Christ.
One team is projected to finish above 500.
Okay, let's end this.
Right.
I may actually cut off with you early as well because things are happening.
All right. For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck with all of your win total futures and whatever else you have in your portfolio as it pertains to the NFC North. Most importantly, though, with a Jaylen Warren rushing total over his posted number, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.